So today's video is about factors and multiples. So what are factors? Factors are two numbers that multiply together to equal another number. And every number has a certain number of factors. So every number has a certain number of numbers that can multiply to give you that number. What are multiples? Multiples are numbers that are all divisible by another number. And when you think about the multiples, you really want to kind of think about like the multiplication chart. And the thing about multiples are multiples go on forever. There's no limit to the number of multiples a number can have because you can always keep multiplying and go higher and higher and higher. So let's look at how you find the factors of a number. So for our first example, we want to find the factors of 24. That means we want to find all of the numbers that multiply to give us 24. So there's two options for how you can actually solve this. Our first option is by using what's called a factor rainbow. And it actually reminds you of a rainbow. That's why it's called the factor rainbow. And so the steps for a factor rainbow, and here's an example of a factor rainbow, is you want to start with 1 and 24 because you know 1 times any number gives you that number. So you know one pair of factors, two numbers that multiply together to give you 24 would be 1 and 24. And 24 would be our biggest factor. So the biggest factor of any number is always the number itself, and the smallest factor of any number is always 1. So that's how you'll always start your rainbow. Then you want to think about, okay, does anything multiply with 2 to give me 24? Well, we know that 2 times 12 gives us 24. So that's the next part of our rainbow. Then you think about the next number, 3. Does anything multiply with 3 to give us 24? And then we know, well, 3 times 8 actually gives us 24. So that's our next pair of factors. Then we go to the next number, 4. Anything multiply with 4 to give you 24? And we know 4 times 6 gives you 24. Then we think about, does anything multiply with 5 to give you 24? And we learn from the divisibility rules, well, nothing with 5 because 24 would have to end with a 5 or a 0. So we know 5 can't be a factor of 24. And then the next number is 6, and we see we already have 6 on there, which lets us know we have found all the factors, and that's the end of our rainbow. So that's one way you can use a factor rainbow. Your second option is that you can use what's called a T-chart. So the reason it's called a T-chart is because it actually looks like the letter T. You're going to put the number at the top of the T. Then on each side of the letter T, you're again going to look for pairs of numbers that multiply to give you 24. Again, you always want to start with 1 in the number because you always know 1 times that number will give you that number. So the first factor pair would be 1 and 24. Then again, you just basically kind of go down the number. So you want to think about 2. Can anything times 2 give me 24? Well, actually, yeah. 2 times 12. So there's our next factor pair. Then you want to think anything times 3. And we know 3 times 8. Then anything times 4. And we say, oh yeah, 4 times 6. And then we say, does anything times 5 give us 24? And the answer would be no. And then we say, does anything times 6? And we say, well, we already have 6 on there. So then we know, okay, we're at the end of our factor tree. So, our factor T-chart. So basically, when you're finding factors, the easiest way is to think about factor pairs. And if you're not sure if a number is a factor, you want to use the divisibility rules to help you to kind of give you a shortcut to see if something could be a factor. So the next word we learned was multiples, and we want to look at how do you find the multiples of a number. And like I said, when you think about the multiples, you really want to think about the multiplication chart because all of the numbers inside of the multiplication chart are multiples. So if we look at 1, the multiples of 1 are these numbers going straight across inside the chart. The multiples of 2 are these numbers going straight across inside of the chart. So we want to look at the first 5 multiples of 7. And we want to have a limit to the number of multiples that we give because, like I said, multiples can go on forever. So the first multiple of 7, well, what's 7 times 1? It's 7. Then the second multiple would be 7 times 2, which is 14. The third multiple, 7 times 3, so the third multiple is 21. Then when we do 7 times 4, that gives us the fourth multiple, which is 28. We do 7 times 5, that gives us the fifth multiple, which is 35. And as you can see, all of those values are right here in the table. And could we go on? Yeah, we could do 7 times 6, 7 times 7, 7 times 8, 7 times 9, and we could keep going and on and on and on forever. So like I said, multiples do go on forever. So we would say that the first 5 multiples of 7 are 7, 14, 21, 28, and 35. So how do you find the multiples of a number not on the multiplication chart? Because the multiplication chart only goes up to the number 12. So now we want to find the first 5 multiples of 22. Well, first thing we do is do 22 times 1, and that will give us 22. Then to find the next multiple, you're going to do 22 times 2, and that gives us 44. Then we'll do 22 times 3, and that gives us the next multiple, which is 66. Then we'll do 22 times 4, and that gives us the next multiple, which is 88. And then we'll do 22 times 5, and that gives us the next multiple, which is 110. And we could keep going like this. We could do 22 times 6, 22 times 7, and on and on and on, depending on how many multiples you're asked to give. So again, the first 5 multiples of 22 are 22, 44, 66, 88, and 110. So the main thing you want to remember about factors and multiples, and it's very common for students to mix up factors and multiples. So multiples are always getting bigger. So they're always bigger than the number itself. So if you look at the multiples of 22, they may start with 22, but then the rest of the numbers get bigger and bigger and bigger. But if you think about the factors are actually smaller than the number itself. So that's one way to kind of tell the difference, that factors are actually smaller than the number itself, and multiples actually multiply and get bigger. But it's important to know the difference between the two, so that you know when you're being asked for which one, you give them exactly what they're looking for. So be very careful with that. It's a common mistake. And keep in mind that with the factors, you got 2 options. You can do that T-chart, or you can do the rainbow. So your last step today is, of course, to teach the tiger something that you learned in the video today.